For more on Apple's big event, let's bring in Fast Money friend and Loup Ventures founder Gene Munster. Gene, I will ask you the same question I asked this desk. Are you more bullish on Apple today versus 24 hours ago?
So, Melissa, I'm equally bullish as I was 24 hours ago, but that is remarkably more bullish than most investors are. I think this should be a $350 as a starting point. I think a 24 multiple, a P&G multiple.
That's pretty bullish,
Everything
Gene.
they did today. Yeah, it's unchanged from where my optimism was yesterday. As far as what we saw today, just quickly, Melissa, I think that we focus a lot on the features around this. They're really honed in on the camera and the battery. Those are some of the two bigger hot buttons for phone consumers. So they really delivered on that piece. But I think what's more important, what gets lost, and I think these details, is this concept that what's most important is their ability to grow their user base. And I want to give credit to Doris Hetu, has really pioneered this thinking. But I agree with it. Essentially, you're advancing the quality of the phones that they come out with today find themselves in other people's hands down the road in the secondary market. It doesn't sound like a glamorous topic, but it's critical to understanding this value proposition and why the stock can go higher, is that their base is growing at, call it 10% of year of iPhone users, even though iPhones that were down 15% in the past year. There's something bigger going around the quality of their products. They are simply the world's greatest consumer tech products. They have longer lives than their first user, and that is creating essentially a fabric of tech around consumers that I think is dramatically undervalued by investors.
Gene, it's Karen. So I understand what you're saying about the base getting bigger, but help us understand this multiple issue we're talking about. When you think maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, what do you think the mix of the two businesses will be between hardware and more recurring revenue?
So I think it's still going to be dramatically hardware. Today we're at, call it 82% hardware. I think in a few years we're probably around 70, 75%. But this concept of hardware as a service, I know it seems abstract here, but this idea that people end up, whether it's every year, every 3 or 4 years, but buying hardware on a recurring basis. I believe that, appreciate Tim's view about the sum of the parts, but I think that this story is more about just a spend, an annual spend. And I think that it's not about the service revenue or the hardware revenue. If you're interested, Apple's per user annual spend is $300. That's 3x higher than it is on Facebook in the US, much lower globally for Facebook. So these are some impressive customer base, these billion users that they have, and they're indifferent to whether it's hardware or services.
Gene, I got a quick question for you. I mean, we talk about AI all the time in different categories, but what do you think right now in terms of Apple? Obviously, they went and got an executive from Google that was in that category. Now they're at Apple. What do you think of that, and what is the prognosis in terms of time frame? When are we going to see more and more of that coming out?
So they try to weave into days like today some of what they're doing around machine learning and AI, like around photos, but that's not really the substance of it. The biggest area is around the car. I'm hesitant to say what that approach is going to be around mobility, transportation, but that's probably, Tim Cook has a long time referred to this as the mother of all AI projects. So that's something that is a little distant to really put some framework around. But when you think about AI, it's at its most basic level is all products, whether it's your camera, whether it's your inbox with your email, whether it's your self-driving car, are going to have some element of AI woven inside it. And it's good that Apple has some of the best people in the world working on that.
Last quick question, Gene, and that is, when you say Apple's going to be in the 300s, how do you get there with just a hardware, with primarily a hardware multiple?
It takes for the street, this takes years to get people's opinion to change about this. But I think what you will slowly see is this better focus on the user base and separately about just the overall revenue growing. And if they can show that despite ebbs and flows and features in the product cycle or the global economy, that they can show that revenue can inch higher, I think that that would deserve a multiple. Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola are not high-growth companies, but they get multiples in the mid-20%, and I think Apple deserves as such.
Gene, thanks. Good to see you. Gene Munster joining us from
Thank
Cupertino, California. Let's talk about the declines that we saw across the board of the media stocks based on Apple TV, $4.99 a month.
Well, I don't think Apple TV Plus is going to be material for Apple for a few years.
Even just at the pricing.
Yeah. I think in terms of what the content will be, et cetera. But the message has been very clear, and I think Netflix has rung this out. There's an enormous amount of competition in the space, and it's finally coming home. And we knew that there was going to be over-the-top bundles across the entire space. And now I think consumers are in a position to choose. I think Apple is in the game, but this is not why I like Apple today.
I can understand why Netflix went down. I think Roku down 10% is probably an overreaction, but I can understand why people are selling first, asking questions later, given the run Roku has had over the last 6 weeks. So if I'm looking across the landscape, I think the opportunity is probably in Roku. And quickly, Gene at 350, okay, I'll play the game. But in order to get there with a 24 multiple, you're talking about $14.50 or so in earnings, which probably makes him high in the street. I commend him for having that conviction. But right now, I think that's a little excessive. I could see 280, 350 is probably a reach.